Tonight, we step back more than 1,000 years into a world of wooden ships and smoky halls where the air is thick with salt spray and hearth fire, and where your survival depends less on your charm and more on how quickly you can chop wood or swing an axe. You are about to set foot in Viking times. It sounds romantic, long ships cutting through waves, brave warriors with shining helmets. But let's be honest, you probably won't survive this, and if you do, you'll be limping, frost-bitten, and probably reeking of fish guts by breakfast. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you're here, let me know in the comments, what's your local time and where are you listening from? It always fascinates me to imagine this story being heard across so many different corners of the world. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The ship rocks beneath your feet, but not for long. The prow nudges against a makeshift dock of rough timbers bound with iron nails, and shouts echo across the small inlet. You clutch at the gunwale, half dizzy from the endless days of rowing, the brine still crusted in your hair, and suddenly the men around you start hurling coils of rope onto land. They shout in Old Norse, a mix of gruff orders and jokes you don't quite catch, though the laughter feels sharp and unkind, as if they already know you'll stumble as soon as you try to walk on solid ground. You step down into mud. Not graceful, not triumphant, mud oozes up over your leather shoes instantly, a sticky, sucking sound that clings and promises never to let go. Welcome to your new home. The village is alive in a way that feels overwhelming. Smoke curls from turf-roofed longhouses, thick and pungent with burning peat and animal dung. Chickens scatter at your clumsy steps, a dog barks, and a knot of children run past, their blonde hair in snarls, their cheeks red with cold and mischief. They barely glance at you, because in this world, strangers arrive often. Traders, raiders, the occasional outlaw. You are one more face in a crowd of necessity. Your first impression? This is no place for comfort. The ground is uneven, scattered with bones from last night's meal, and fish heads drying in the weak sun. At the shore, racks of cod hang stiff as planks, salted and wind-burnt. They'll be stored for the coming winter, when the sea will be a frozen death trap and hunting will barely keep bellies full. And as you wrinkle your nose, one of the locals laughs. Get used to that smell, it's the perfume of survival. A woman passes by with a wooden bucket, the iron handle biting into her hands. She spares you only a glance before barking something at her child, who has been chasing a half-wild pig around the mud. There is no polite welcome here, no neat handshake. The Vikings are not rude, they are simply busy. Life is a list of tasks, and wasting time on pleasantries is as foolish as wasting firewood in winter. Still, a man approaches. Broad-shouldered, his beard braided with bits of copper, his tunic patched in half a dozen places. He sizes you up like he's assessing a broken cart, deciding whether you're worth fixing or best left to rot. Then he thrusts something into your hand. It's a small hatchet, dull and chipped. His grin shows yellow teeth. You've just been hired or maybe conscripted into labor. You want to protest, maybe explain that you don't know the first thing about splitting logs or repairing fences. But here, your protests are meaningless. In Viking culture, work is survival, and survival is community. If you refuse, you're not just lazy, you're dangerous. A mouth that doesn't contribute but still eats is a threat to everyone else. So you follow him, stumbling along the muddy paths between houses. The longhouse looms above you, 30, maybe 40 feet long, its roof sagging with turf and sod, grass sprouting like unkempt hair. The smell inside is immediate: sweat, smoke, wet wool. You blink in the dim light, and your eyes adjust to see women stirring pots over an open hearth, men bent over repairing tools, and children curled up against the wall, gnawing on crusts of bread. They barely glance at you, because in this world, strangers arrive often. Traders, raiders, the occasional outlaw. You are one more face in a crowd of necessity. And it's this moment where you feel it fully, the claustrophobia of Viking life. You had imagined space, wide seas, open fields, freedom. But in truth, life here is compressed into smoky rooms, into routines of work and watchfulness, and to hierarchies you don't yet understand. Every glance measures you, every silence reminds you that you don't belong. The bearded man pushes a log at your feet, points at the hatchet, and shrugs. Simple enough, chop. Of course, it's not simple. The wood is dense with sap, your hatchet is dull, and your arms are weak from rowing. The first strike glances off, and laughter erupts from behind you. Not cruel this time, more like a test. The Vikings loved tests. Tests of strength, wit, courage. Fail them, and you're little better than a thrall, a slave. Pass, and maybe you're worth the food you'll eat tonight. You try again. This time the blade bites deeper. The log splits unevenly, but it splits. A few nods of approval, and the laughter dies down. Not praise, but acceptance. Outside, life continues. A group of men haul a net from the shallows, writhing silver fish spilling onto the sand. A blacksmith hammers at an anvil, sparks spitting as he shapes an axe head. Somewhere farther off, the deep sound of a horn echoes. Maybe a warning, maybe just a signal for gathering. You're starting to understand. This world is raw and immediate. Every sound is sharper, every task essential. Forget romantic notions of Viking glory. Here, survival is firewood, fish, and the favor of the people around you. And while you're still clutching that chipped hatchet, sweat running down your back despite the cold, you notice something else. Hanging above the hearth, carved into wood darkened by years of smoke, is a series of runes, protective marks perhaps, warding off ill luck or evil spirits. Historians still argue whether the average Viking truly believed in magic, or whether it was more of a cultural reassurance, like a lucky charm today. But for the people living here, it doesn't matter. The runes stand watch as faithfully as the family dog. And you, newcomer, will need all the protection you can get. By now, the mud on your shoes has stiffened, the smoke has embedded itself into your hair, and your hands are raw. You've barely been here an hour, and already you know this much. Viking life doesn't wait for you to adjust. It demands you adjust, or be left behind. And as the sun dips low, the air turning sharper with cold, you realize something with a sinking weight in your stomach. This was just the welcome. Tomorrow comes the real work. The first thing you notice is the cold. Not a polite, crisp chill, the kind you might enjoy on a winter stroll with a scarf and a coffee, but a kind of cold that slaps you awake and lingers like an unwanted guest. It seeps into your bones before your eyes even open. There's no glass window glowing with morning light, only a small smoke hole in the longhouse roof and the gray haze of dawn pressing through. You're sleeping on a straw pallet that smells faintly of goat and more strongly of damp, and yes, your nose is already running. Someone prods your foot, not a gentle shake, not a rise and shine, but a shove, because there is no time to laze. The fire at the hearth has burned low, and if no one feeds it soon, it will die. And restarting it means flint, tinder, and cold fingers fumbling for sparks. Congratulations, you've been nominated to help keep it alive. You crawl out from your straw heap, brushing off a few suspiciously alive insects, and stumble toward the hearth. The embers are glowing faintly. You toss on some splinters of kindling, then a heavier log, blowing gently until the orange glow blooms into hungry flame. Success, one small victory before the day even begins. But don't relax, you have about 50 more chores waiting. Outside, the morning mist clings low over the village. The earth is stiff with frost, and the mud from yesterday has frozen into ridges sharp enough to bruise your feet through your thin shoes. You hear the rhythmic thud of an axe already swinging somewhere nearby. Someone smarter than you has been awake for an hour, splitting wood before the cold set in. Your task? Go find water. Easy enough, you think, until you realize the stream is nearly frozen. The bucket in your hand is wooden, with iron bands that bite your skin in the chill. As you kneel at the edge of the water, breaking the thin ice, your fingers sting and burn. The cold water sloshes up and soaks your sleeves. You try not to curse, but the words slip out in a hiss, and you earn a chuckle from the man beside you who plunges his bare arms into the stream like it's no big deal. That's the first lesson of Viking mornings. Nobody cares about your comfort. Pain is not a complaint, it's just background noise. By the time you stagger back with the bucket, shoulders aching, breakfast preparations have begun. Don't expect eggs and bacon. Instead, there's coarse bread from barley flour, dark and dense, almost gritty with husks, sometimes softened with butter if you're lucky, or maybe dipped into yesterday's fish stew. Alongside it, a weak ale or a watered-down mead. Yes, even in the morning. It's safer than drinking from stagnant water, and besides, the buzz helps numb the day's aches before they even begin. As you chew the tough bread, a woman pushes a pail into your arms. "Gaeta," she says, pointing toward the small byre at the edge of the village. The goats are bleating impatiently. You've been recruited as a milker. Now, if you've never milked a goat before, prepare for humiliation. You crouch on the low stool, grip awkwardly at the teats, and squeeze. The goat looks back at you with an expression that could only be described as judgmental. Nothing comes out. You try again. The goat stamps a huff, nearly tipping the bucket. A child nearby snickers, effortlessly milking another goat with steady rhythm. You're tempted to hand over your bucket in shame, but eventually, with fumbling persistence, a thin stream of warm milk sputters into the pail. Victory again, though the goat's glare suggests it's withholding applause. And here's a quirky tidbit. Some Viking households believed goat's milk had protective qualities against evil spirits, especially if it was poured at the threshold of a house. Imagine that, your clumsy milking could double as magical defense. Once the animals are fed and milked, it's back to wood cutting. Remember that hatchet you used yesterday? It's still dull, and now your hands are blistered. Splitting logs is no glamorous work. Every swing sends shocks up your arms, and the pile you make is pitiful compared to the neat stacks your neighbors produce. They glance at your slow progress, and you feel the weight of their judgment again. Here, laziness isn't just frowned upon, it could be the difference between a warm longhouse and a frozen one when winter deepens. The chores roll on without mercy. Carry fodder for the cows, spread fresh straw for the pigs, mend the fence where the sheep push through. And each time you think you've finished, another task appears, as endless as the mist that refuses to lift from the fields. Historians still argue whether Viking daily labor was strictly divided by gender or more fluid depending on necessity. What is clear, though, is that everyone worked. Children hauled water, women spun wool and managed farms, men fished, built and plowed, but overlap was common. In the biting chill of dawn, no one says, "That's not my job." By midday, your body feels older than your years, your back aches, your shoulders scream, and your hands are raw with tiny cuts. And yet around you, life hums with relentless motion. A blacksmith pounds iron into shape, sparks flashing like fireflies. Women sit at looms, their fingers flying over threads, weaving cloth that will take months to finish. Even the children carry bundles of sticks bigger than their torsos. At one point, you pause, leaning against a fence post, trying to stretch out your aching muscles. A man nearby, sharpening a scythe, raises an eyebrow and mutters something that probably translates to lazy. You straighten immediately. Lesson number 2, never let anyone see you idle. The cold never lets up either. Even as you sweat through layers of wool, the icy air clings to your skin. When you step into shade, the chill cuts instantly. By evening, your clothes are stiff with sweat and frost, and your breath rises in pale clouds. Still, there's a rhythm forming. Haul, chop, mend, milk. The endless cycle of Viking survival. Somewhere deep down, a part of you is impressed. These people are tough, not in a movie hero way, but in the quiet, relentless endurance that keeps a village alive against wind, sea, and hunger. And as the sun sets, painting the horizon with streaks of orange and purple, you collapse on your straw bed again. The longhouse is filled with the sounds of others coughing, murmuring, eating. You smell smoke, sweat, and stew. You taste salt still lingering on your lips. And you realize this is only day 2. Your body is already screaming, but the Vikings around you, well, they'll be up at dawn tomorrow, ready to do it all again. So, will you last? Maybe, but only if you learn quickly, and maybe if you convince that goat to stop judging you. Your stomach growls before the dawn fire is even rekindled. Hunger is constant here, like a quiet drumbeat beneath every chore, every breath. And when breakfast comes, it doesn't look like the golden pancakes or sizzling bacon you might dream of in a modern kitchen. Instead, someone presses a hunk of coarse bread into your hands. The bread is heavy, dense with barley or rye, its crust baked hard in the smoky hearth. The taste? Chewy, earthy, with the faint grit of stone still clinging from the grinding process. You chew and chew, jaw aching, before it finally breaks down enough to swallow. And you're grateful for it because the alternative is nothing. A smear of butter softens it, if you're lucky. Sometimes a pinch of salt. But don't expect variety. The Vikings ate for survival, not indulgence. Next to the bread comes a cup. Not water. That would be too dangerous. Streams could be clean one day and teeming with sickness the next. Instead, it's ale. Thin, weak, brewed at home with whatever grains were available. It's not meant to make you stumble, but to keep you alive. The taste is sour, faintly sweet, with the musty tang of yeast. You drink it down, feeling the warmth spread in your belly, a small comfort against the morning chill. But here's the reality check. That same bread and ale will appear again at midday, and again at night, day after day, week after week, until your body aches for something green, something fresh, something that doesn't crunch with husks between your teeth. Still, bread and beer are only the beginning. The heart of Viking diet beats with fish. Walk down toward the shore and you'll see why. Nets are strung on racks, drying in the weak sun. Wooden frames are covered with split cod, their pale bodies stiff, salted, and left to cure in the wind. The smell is overpowering, sharp, briny, a mix of ocean and decay that clings to your clothes. The locals hardly notice it. To them, it's the scent of plenty, the promise of survival when the sea freezes over. Lunch might be dried fish, hacked into pieces with a knife and chewed until your jaw tires again. Or maybe it's boiled in a pot, served with a ladle of thin broth and a few root vegetables floating in it like survivors of a shipwreck. The broth steams, filling the longhouse with the mingled scents of fish oil and smoke. You're so hungry by now you don't care. You slurp it down, wiping your mouth with the back of your hand, and for a moment the ache in your stomach quiets. Fish is everywhere. Herring, salmon, cod. And guts too. Nothing is wasted. Intestines are cleaned and used for sausage casings. Heads are boiled for stew. Even the skins, tough and leathery, can be chewed when nothing else remains. It sounds grim, but in this world, grim is better than hungry. One child beside you gnaws happily on a dried fish tail, crunching bones with enthusiasm. You try it, grimace at the splintery texture, and quickly decide that hunger might be the better option. The child laughs. You've just earned the label of soft foreigner. Of course, not every day is fish. Some days it's meat, though less often than you might think. A pig slaughtered in autumn, a sheep sacrificed at a feast, a rare cut of venison if hunters return lucky. Meat is precious, usually salted or smoked for storage. The greasy richness feels decadent after so many days of bread and broth. You lick your fingers clean, ignoring the soot and ash that cling to them. And with meat comes offal: heart, liver, kidneys, all boiled into stew or fried on the hearthstone. Nothing wasted, nothing spared. Some say the liver is especially prized, a dense source of iron in a diet otherwise lacking. You swallow it down quickly, trying not to think too much about the texture. Then there are the oddities. Did you know Vikings ate seaweed? Dried and pressed into cakes, it added minerals in bulk to the diet. Quirky, yes, but effective. Historians still argue whether seaweed was a staple or an emergency food. But either way, when you taste the salty, rubbery strips, you decide it definitely qualifies as an emergency. And what about sweets? Forget sugar, it doesn't exist here. Honey is the only sweetness you'll find, harvested from hives tucked into hollow logs or traded at great cost. Mead, the honey wine, is a luxury saved for feasts or special guests, not for you after a hard day of hauling wood. Instead, fruit comes in the form of wild berries gathered in summer: lingonberries, bilberries, crowberries, eaten fresh or dried for winter. Their tartness shocks your tongue, a sudden burst of flavor in a world of bland grain and brine. For a moment, you almost weep with joy. But the feast doesn't last. Soon, it's back to bread. Evening in the Longhouse is a communal affair. Pots bubble over the hearth, filling the air with smoke so thick that it makes your eyes water. You watch as fish heads, cabbage leaves, and barley are tossed together into a stew. The smoke settles into your clothes, into your hair, into your skin. You'll smell like this forever now. A mix of fish oil, peat fire, and sweat. Consider it your new perfume. You sit shoulder to shoulder with others, dipping your wooden spoon into the shared pot. The taste is simple, earthy, with occasional surprises: a crunch of bone, a stringy bit of cabbage, a sliver of gristle. You glance at your neighbor who's eating with gusto, and you force yourself to follow suit. In the silence between slurps and coughs, you hear the creak of the longhouse beams, the distant bark of a dog, the crackle of the fire. Eating isn't glamorous here. It's survival, plain and heavy. And you begin to realize how much of your day revolves around food. Not just eating it, but finding it, preparing it, preserving it. One elder near the hearth begins telling a story. He gestures with his spoon, eyes gleaming in the firelight, describing a time when the gods walked among men, when Thor himself blessed a feast. The children lean in, wide-eyed, as barley stew drips from their spoons. Stories and food are woven together here, sustenance for the body and for the mind. You, though, are still gnawing on your bread, wishing for something, anything soft. Maybe an apple, maybe a slice of cheese that isn't half mold. But no, tomorrow it will be the same. Bread, ale, fish. The staples of Viking survival, hard as the life that demands them. And yet, somewhere between the crunch of fish bones and the sour taste of ale, you realize something. These meals, as rough as they are, carry the village through storms, through raids, through the long winter nights. Every smoky stew, every gritty loaf is a link in the chain of survival. You may complain, but without them, you wouldn't last a week. So, chew, drink, swallow, repeat. Welcome to dinner, and breakfast, and lunch, and probably tomorrow's menu too. The morning light seeps through cracks in the turf roof, thin and gray, and already your body aches from the weight of yesterday. You're still pulling splinters from your fingers when someone presses a bundle into your arms. Wool, scratchy, heavy, and full of lanolin, its greasy scent reminding you that yes, this once clung to a sheep's back. You look up in confusion, but the answer comes quickly, a pointed gesture toward a loom standing in the corner of the longhouse. Today is not for chopping wood or hauling water. Today, you're drafted into the slow, endless work of making clothing. You thought food was the hardest part of survival. It isn't. Clothing is. Warmth is life in the North, and fabric is as precious as silver. Forget fast fashion. Here, a single tunic can take months to produce, and every stitch, every woven thread is counted carefully. Your modern wardrobe of dozens of shirts and socks would seem like the treasure of a king in Viking eyes. The loom looms, literally, against the wall, tall and strung with vertical threads. The women sit cross-legged on the floor, fingers flying, weaving weft through warp, pulling it taut with wooden tools. You try it. At first you think it's easy. Pass thread, pull tight, repeat. But after 10 minutes your shoulders burn, your fingers cramp, and you've made almost nothing. The woman beside you laughs softly, shaking her head as she fixes your crooked line. You're weaving like a child. The wool itself fights you. Unspun, it clings to your skin. Carding it, teasing out the fibers with wooden combs is tedious, and the lanolin coats your hands until they feel sticky. Spinning it into thread requires patience and rhythm, twisting fibers into a line strong enough to weave. You try to hurry, and the thread breaks again and again. Eventually, a girl half your size takes over, her fingers nimble, her motions smooth. She makes it look easy, but you know now it's anything but. Cloth in this world is wealth. Families who can produce more than they need trade bolts of wool for iron, salt, or silver. Rich chieftains wrap themselves in dyed cloaks, bright with imported reds and blues, proof of trade across oceans. But for most, clothing is plain, practical, patched until it can't hold another stitch. And leather? Oh, leather is worse. Someone shoves a raw hide into your hands, stiff and still faintly smelling of the animal it came from. Your task? Help cure it. That means soaking, scraping, and rubbing until your arms feel like they're ready to fall off. You scrape at the hide with a curved blade, peeling away fat and sinew. The smell is sharp, sour, and clings to your nose long after you've dropped the blade. When you pause to gag, the man beside you only smirks. This is what shoes, belts, and straps are made from. No leather, no survival. After scraping, the hide is soaked in a foul-smelling mixture. Urine. Yes, you heard right. The ammonia helps soften the skin. You wrinkle your nose, but the others dip their hands without hesitation. Later, the hide will be stretched, dried, and rubbed with animal fat or fish oil until supple. The result? Boots to keep out snow, gloves to save fingers, harnesses to tie oxen to plows. You never look at your sneakers the same way again. Even finished clothes don't escape labor. Every garment wears out quickly in the rough Viking life, torn on wood, burned by sparks, soaked in rain. So mending is constant. You're handed a bone needle and coarse thread and shown a tear in a tunic. Your stitches wander like drunken ants. The woman watching sighs, takes the tunic back, and fixes your mess in 3 swift motions. Her hands are rough, scarred, hardened by years of work, and suddenly you realize those hands have saved lives as much as any sword. Historians still argue whether Viking households produced all their textiles themselves or relied heavily on specialized weavers and traders. But either way, the reality is clear. Everyone knew how to mend, patch, and repurpose. A hole left unmended today could mean frostbite tomorrow. Clothing wasn't style, it was survival strategy. And it's not just wool and leather. Fur plays its part too. fox, hare, bear, even dog pelts, lined into cloaks, trimmed around hoods, sewn into mittens. When you stroke a finished fur, soft and warm against your cold fingers, you understand why hunters risked their lives in frozen forests, and why a cloak lined with fur could mark someone as wealthy, powerful, untouchable. In the corner of the longhouse, an old cloak hangs patched in half a dozen colors. Each scrap tells a story, a raid, a trade, a season's survival. Clothing here is never just clothing. It's memory stitched into wool, labor preserved in thread, a family's resilience made visible. But for you, the endless work is crushing. After hours of weaving, carding, scraping, stitching, your hands throb and your back aches. The smoky air stings your eyes, the wool dust clogs your nose. You long for rest, but there is no rest, only another hide to scrape, another hole to mend. You look around. No one else complains. Children spin thread while humming. Women chatter as they weave. Men sharpen tools while rubbing oil into boots. The rhythm of labor is as natural as breathing. You're the only one silently screaming inside. By nightfall, when you finally collapse into straw, your fingers twitch as if still pulling thread, still pushing the needle. You smell of wool grease, urine-soaked leather, and smoke. You want to believe tomorrow will be different, but you know now it won't. This isn't occasional work. It's life. And if you rip your only tunic climbing out of bed tomorrow morning, better hope you've learned to stitch a straight line. By now, you've learned that daylight belongs to labor. But what about night? Surely you think there must be some peace after the goats are milked, the wood chopped, and the bread chewed into oblivion. Surely the longhouse, glowing with its warm hearth, must be a place of rest, of quiet, of comfort. You step through the heavy wooden door, ducking under the low frame, and immediately that hope dissolves in your nostrils. Smoke. Not the delicate curl of a campfire, but a heavy, choking fog that lingers like an uninvited ghost. Your eyes water before you've taken 3 steps. The hearth in the center burns steadily, flames licking over logs, but the smoke doesn't rise neatly into the rafters. It spreads, drifting low, swirling at head height. You cough, and a boy snickers. He's used to it. You aren't. This is Viking architecture at its finest. Long, narrow halls built of timber, sod piled thick on the roof for insulation, a single hearth for light and heat. Windows? Forget it. Glass is a treasure reserved for the wealthy in far-off lands. A smoke hole gapes above, but the winter wind forces it shut half the time, so the smoke has nowhere to go but into your lungs. Privacy? Also forget it. The longhouse stretches 30, 40 feet long, lined with benches and straw mats along the walls. Families pile together, wrapped in cloaks and blankets. Animals sometimes sleep here too. Goats, pigs, even calves, because the combined body heat helps keep the space livable. Imagine sharing your bedroom with a snoring uncle, a wheezing child, and a farting goat all at once. That's not a nightmare, that's Tuesday. You find your sleeping spot squeezed between a wall of woven reeds and another body. The straw under you pokes through your tunic. Something small scurries past your hand. Mouse, rat, who knows? You pull your cloak tighter and try not to think about it. Then come the sounds. A man snores like a war horn across the hall. A baby wails, its mother rocking and humming in the smoky dark. Someone coughs, a deep, rattling cough that doesn't sound temporary. A dog growls softly at a pig rooting in the straw. The longhouse is alive, always alive, even at night. The silence you crave doesn't exist here. And just when you begin to drift, warmth spreading through your aching limbs, your neighbor rolls over and elbows you square in the ribs. No apology, no adjustment. Just another reminder that your body is not your own here. Space is shared, every inch of it. The smells are a world of their own. Smoke dominates, clinging to your hair, your clothes, your skin. Beneath it lurks sweat, goat dung, fish oil, and the sour tang of ale. Add the scent of wool grease and leather scraps, and you've got a cocktail that even the gods would wrinkle their noses at. Yet somehow the Vikings thrived in it. Historians still argue whether people grew nose-blind to the stench or simply associated it with safety and home. For you, though, it's an assault. And yet, look around and you see something more. In the flickering light of the fire, families huddled together. Children curl against their mothers. Friends share blankets. Couples whisper in low voices. Privacy is non-existent, but community is everywhere. Loneliness is impossible in a space like this. You're never truly alone. That's comforting in a way, though also a little suffocating. The hearth itself is sacred. It's not just a fire, it's life. Meals are cooked here, tools hardened in the flames, stories told in its glow. Some believe the gods watch through the fire, that offerings tossed into it, bits of food, drops of mead, carry prayers upward with the smoke. You watch as someone sprinkles salt into the flames, murmuring a few words. A superstition or a genuine plea for protection? Hard to say. Quirky tidbit. Some Viking homes actually had small house spirits, believed to dwell in the rafters or beneath the floor. People would leave crumbs or drops of milk for them, hoping for luck. You don't see anyone feeding spirits tonight, but the way people glance into shadowed corners makes you wonder if they're being polite to unseen guests. The longer you lie awake, the more you realize how alien this life is compared to modern solitude. There are no doors to close, no rooms to retreat to, no headphones to drown out the world. Every cough, every mutter, every snore belongs to you as much as to the people making them. Even your dreams, when they come, feel like they're borrowed from the firelight and the murmurings around you. You shift on the straw. The man beside you mutters in his sleep. Across the hall, someone gets up, steps creaking on the planks as they head outside, maybe for the latrine, maybe just for air. The door opens and a rush of icy wind clears the smoke for a moment before it slams shut again. The reprieve is brief, but you savor it like the sweetest breath you've ever taken. By dawn, your throat feels raw from the smoke, your eyes crusted with soot. You're sore from the straw, stiff from the cold, and groggy from constant interruptions. Yet around you, people are already stirring. Someone pokes the embers to life. Children yawn and stretch. A dog barks, eager for daylight. And you? You're learning the third great rule of Viking survival. Rest is never private, never silent, and never truly restful. You don't sleep alone here. You sleep with the weight of a village pressed in around you, with smoke in your lungs and straw in your hair. Somehow they rise each morning ready to face another brutal day. You, meanwhile, would give anything for a quiet room, a clean pillow, and maybe, just maybe, a night without someone snoring like Thor himself had a chest cold. But tough luck. Tonight you'll crawl back into the same smoke and straw. And tomorrow, and the next day. That's Viking life. Comfort is a luxury, community is mandatory. So roll over, pull your cloak tighter, and pray the goat doesn't decide to share your straw pile tonight. Morning breaks with the same gray light you've grown used to. You stumble from the longhouse, coughing out the last clinging taste of smoke, expecting another day of chores. Fish guts, or maybe patching leather. But today feels different. The air is alive with anticipation, the way a town buzzes before a festival or a football match. People are gathering, voices raised, boots crunching over frost-hardened earth. Someone nudges you. "Thing today," they mutter, like you should already know. And just like that, you're swept into a tide of villagers heading toward a clearing marked by stones and trampled earth, the site of the Thing, the Viking assembly where law, order, and chaos collide. You expect a courtroom, maybe robes or gavel bangs. Instead, you find shouting. Men and women alike raise their voices, faces red, fists waving. At the center, a circle has been cleared, and a tall man with gray hair and a cloak pinned at the shoulder holds up his hand for silence. He's a law speaker, the human library of legal tradition. His role? Recite the law from memory, because in this world, there are no books, no handy PDFs, not even scribbled notes, just the living, breathing word. He begins, and you're impressed. Paragraph after paragraph, ruling after ruling, all spilling from his mouth without hesitation. It's not just recitation, it's a performance. The crowd nods, mutters, reacts. They know these laws as well as he does, and heaven help him if he skips a clause. The Thing is democracy, Viking style, but don't let the word fool you. Here, justice depends on your reputation, your alliances, and who can shout the loudest. The first case is simple. Two neighbors fighting over grazing rights. One claims the other's goats trampled his barley. The crowd roars with laughter when the accused insists, straight-faced, that the goats simply wandered where Odin willed them. The law speaker listens, the neighbors argue, and finally a fine is ordered. The guilty man must pay in silver, or, if he doesn't have it, in goods, a goat for a goat, so to speak. You're tempted to think this is quaint, even fair, but then the second case begins. It's bloodier. A feud has erupted between two families, sparked by an insult at a feast and fueled by revenge killings. You see the tension in their faces as they step into the circle. Voices rise, weapons flash at hips. The law speaker tries to calm them, but the anger simmers hot. This isn't just about laws, it's about honor. In Viking times, insults can sting worse than blades, and if you don't avenge your family, you may as well hang up your dignity with yesterday's fish heads. The assembly debates. Should the killer pay weregild, a man price, silver compensation for the life taken? Or is blood the only payment acceptable? Historians still argue whether these assemblies truly prevented violence or just redirected it into more acceptable forms. From your vantage point, it looks like both sides are itching for another round of swordplay. You try to slip back, blend into the crowd, but the Thing isn't a place for hiding. Everyone participates. Someone notices you standing mute and gives you a shove. Speak, they urge. Who's in the right? You blink. You, a stranger who still hasn't figured out how to light a hearth without coughing up a lung, are now expected to pass judgment on a feud older than you are? The crowd stares. You stammer something about fairness, about peace. A few nod. Others scowl. Luckily, your opinion doesn't matter much. It's just a ritual of participation, a reminder that law is everyone's business here. That doesn't mean you're safe, though. Slip of the tongue, and you could offend the wrong family. Imagine being exiled because you picked the wrong side of a goat dispute. Not a great way to go down in history. As the Thing continues, you realize Viking justice is less about rules and more about balance. Too strict, and no one obeys. Too lenient, and feuds spiral out of control. It's a fragile dance, one where the community itself is the judge, jury, and sometimes executioner. Quirky tidbit: some assemblies weren't all shouting and threats. They doubled as markets and social mixers. People brought goods to trade, furs, tools, even imported silk if they were lucky. Marriages could be arranged, alliances formed, songs sung. Think of it as a medieval blend of courtroom, farmer's market, and awkward family reunion. You might leave with justice, or with a new spouse, or both. The law speaker calls for silence again. A judgment is reached. One man is ordered to pay silver. Another must host a feast as recompense for an insult. A third is warned, repeat your crime, and exile awaits. Exile, in Viking terms, isn't just a punishment, it's a slow death. Cast out from community, stripped of protection, you'd face the world alone. Fair game for anyone who wanted to strike you down. Compared to that, even fines feel merciful. By the end of the day, your ears ring from shouting. Your throat is hoarse from smoke and dust. The thing disperses, people trudging back toward their longhouses, muttering about judgments won and lost. You walk too, pondering how precarious life feels here. No police, no prisons, no innocent until proven guilty. Just the loud, messy, often terrifying negotiation of community. And you're grateful you didn't accidentally insult anyone. Because in a world where a crooked smile could spark a blood feud, surviving one day at the thing is an accomplishment in itself. By now, you've learned the rhythm of chores, the sting of smoke, the roar of the thing. But today, you're handed something heavier than a pail of milk or a bundle of reeds, an axe. Not for chopping firewood, no. This is for shaping timbers, bending planks, carving the bones of something that means everything to these people, a ship. The Vikings are nothing without their boats. They're the lifeblood of raiding, trading, and traveling, the reason Scandinavia reached far beyond its cold, jagged shores. And now you, with your soft hands and questionable grip, are about to be introduced to the brutal, beautiful labor of shipbuilding. The work site is already alive when you arrive. A skeleton of oak ribs arcs upward, the beginnings of a longship that one day will skim over the sea like a serpent. Men and women work side by side. Yes, despite modern stereotypes, women also contributed here, carrying wood, shaping nails, and weaving ropes. The air smells of fresh split oak and tar. Hammers thud in rhythm. Sparks fly as iron is worked on a small forge nearby. You heft the axe. It feels awkward, too heavy on one end, the haft rough against your palms. A bearded man demonstrates, swinging with steady precision, chipping long curls of wood away from a timber. Then he shoves it into your hands, grunts, and steps back. You swing. Too hard. The blade bites too deep, sticking fast. He chuckles, pries it free, and gestures again. Lighter, smoother, more rhythm than strength. You try again and again until sweat runs down your back and your palms blister. The timber looks more mangled than shaped, but hey, progress. The ship is a masterpiece of engineering, though you're too tired to appreciate it fully. Planks overlap like scales, fastened with iron rivets. Tar, wool, and animal hair are stuffed into seams for waterproofing. Ropes are twisted from hemp and walrus hide. Every detail is calculated down to the curve of the keel, designed to cut both river and sea with equal grace. You marvel that such fragile-seeming wood can form something seaworthy. Mainstream historical fact: Viking longships could travel at speeds of up to 15 knots with favorable wind. They were so shallow drafted they could sail up rivers barely waist deep, yet sturdy enough to cross the open North Sea. Imagine one vessel capable of raiding coastal England one month and docking in the heart of Paris the next. That's the genius you're sweating into today. Of course, not everyone here is building ships. Some shape weapons, axes, spears, and swords. You're handed a smaller tool this time, a whetstone, and told to sharpen a blade. The iron sings as he drags stone against edge. Sparks catch on your tunic. You flinch, but the blacksmith doesn't even look up. For him, this is background noise. For you, it's another reminder that Viking daily life leaves little room for hesitation. It isn't just muscles that ache. Your lungs burn from the forge smoke, your shoulders from endless lifting, your head from the constant pounding rhythm of hammer and adze. You wonder how anyone keeps this up for years. But they do, because to fail here isn't just to let down your neighbors, it's to deny them travel, trade, survival. Ships mean food, silver, and new lands. Weapons mean protection and power. If you can't contribute, you're just dead weight. You pause, leaning on your axe, and look around. Some boys, barely teenagers, are hauling planks longer than they are tall. Their knuckles are raw, their tunics sweat-stained. A woman sits at the edge of the site, twisting fibers into rope, her fingers moving so quickly they blur. Everyone contributes, no excuses. You suddenly miss modern gyms with their air conditioning and padded grips. At least there, aching muscles are optional. A quirky tidbit floats into your mind, shared by a gray-haired man as he wipes tar from his hands. Some Vikings supposedly named their ships as if they were living beings. They carved dragon heads not only to intimidate enemies, but to ward off sea monsters. "Never trust a ship without a name," he mutters, half serious. He pats the oak ribs as if soothing a beast. You give the wood a nervous glance, as though it might rear up and demand your respect too. Scholars still argue whether Viking swordsmithing was as advanced as legends claim. Some believe their pattern-welded blades were superior to anything in Europe, glowing with wave-like designs that inspired awe. Others think much of the hype comes from later Romanticism. Standing here, watching sparks fly from a glowing billet of iron, you can't decide either way. All you know is the smell of hot metal, the clang of hammer on anvil, and your arm threatening mutiny if you swing again. By late afternoon, you're broken. Your palms are blistered, your shoulders throb, and your back feels like someone has driven a spear through it. Yet the ship grows, plank by plank, beam by beam. Tomorrow, and the day after, and the one after that, it will continue. Weeks, months, maybe years of labor until it's ready to launch. And then, after all that, you might die on its maiden voyage. Comforting thought. You stagger away, barely able to lift your arms. Some of the builders laugh as you go, not unkindly. They remember their first day too. You collapse onto the grass, staring up at a sky smeared with red and gold. Somewhere nearby, the steady thud of axe and hammer continues, the heartbeat of Viking life. And you've learned another hard truth. In this world, your survival isn't measured by how clever you are or how soft your bed is, but what your hands can build, shape, and lift. And tonight, as your muscles scream in protest, you understand why Viking strength wasn't legendary. It was necessary. The longship is ready. Not finished by your hands alone, you'd have more luck weaving straw into steel, but built by the countless aching backs and blistered palms of the entire village. And now it waits at the shoreline like a restless predator, its dragon head snarling toward the sea, as if eager for blood. You're not given much time to admire it. A shout rips through the air, axes and spears are passed out, shields thump against shoulders. The air smells of tar, wet rope, and nervous sweat. You realize, too late, that you're not just here to see the ship sail, you're here to join it. And so you climb aboard, heart hammering, legs already trembling from the shifting deck. The current tugs, the sail unfurls with a crack, and suddenly the boat surges forward. The rhythmic pull of oars fills the air, a sound both hypnotic and terrifying. The shore slips away, the village shrinks, and in its place opens the endless expanse of gray water. At first, you think this is thrilling. The wind whips your hair, the sail snaps, and the ship glides like an arrow loosed from a bow. But then the hours drag. Oarsmen row until their hands bleed, sweat dripping into their beards. You're handed an oar, of course, because apparently rowing is a group project. Within minutes, your shoulders scream, your palms feel like someone pressed them against hot iron, and your breath comes ragged. You steal glances at the others who row as steadily as though born for it, which, in a sense, they were. The sea doesn't care about your comfort. It surges beneath you, slamming the hull, spraying salt into your eyes. The deck slickens. You cling to the oar, to the rhythm, to anything that keeps you upright. And all the while, the men around you chant under their breath, half prayer, half war song. Their voices blend with the creak of wood and the crash of waves, creating a soundtrack that vibrates in your bones. Somewhere, between the strokes, the realization hits. This isn't a joyride. It's a raid. The target appears by dusk. A small monastery squats on the coastline, its walls low, its door unguarded. Smoke from cooking fires drifts lazily upward. To your Viking companions, this is opportunity incarnate. Easy plunder, defenseless monks, silver waiting to be stuffed into sacks. To you, it's something else entirely. A quiet place of prayer, about to be ripped open like a carcass. The dragon-headed prow cuts into shallows. The men leap out, water up to their knees, pulling the ship ashore. You stumble after them, shield too heavy, axe too slippery in your sweat-slick grip. The ground feels wrong under your feet, the air too still, too expectant. And then it begins. A shout, guttural and wild, boots pounding over earth, axes splintering under axes. Monks scatter like birds flushed from brush. One stumbles, caught by the collar, dragged back screaming. Another throws his hands skyward, muttering prayers as if words could stop steel. You stand frozen, unable to decide if you should follow, fight, or flee. The world tilts into chaos. From where you stand, Viking glory looks less like honor and more like terror. Screams mingled with laughter. A chest of silver chalices spills across the ground. Smoke curls from the roof as someone sets a fire for fun, not necessity. You nearly trip over a body, alive, just dazed, blood matting his hair. He groans. You stagger back, bile rising. This isn't the neat, heroic version of history books. This is confusion, panic, and brutality in surround sound. One of the raiders slaps you on the back, grinning, blood smeared across his face. He shouts something you can't understand and shoves a sack into your arms. You look down. It's heavy, jingling with stolen silver. He gestures for you to carry it back to the ship. Congratulations, you're officially a participant in the raid, like it or not. Historians still argue whether Viking raids were primarily about wealth, food shortages, or prestige among peers. Standing here, silver cutting into your shoulder, you realize it doesn't matter much to the people holding the torches. For them, it's survival mixed with adrenaline, terror painted as triumph. You do as you're told. Run back to the ship, load silver, run again. Each trip is a blur of smoke, screams, and shadows darting through the firelight. You notice how quickly this battle is over. The monks had no chance. The Vikings came like a storm, and now they're gone just as fast, dragging plunder, captives, and you back toward the ship. By the time you clamber aboard again, chest heaving, the monastery is already collapsing into ash. The boat pushes off, oars dipping into black water. Behind you, orange flames claw at the night sky. Ahead of you, more rowing, more waves, more silence than you can stand. Your body aches, your mind reels. You've seen the legend of the Viking raid stripped bare. No honor duels under the stars, no gleaming heroes, just hungry, desperate people striking fast and vanishing quicker. You're not sure whether to admire their efficiency or shudder at their ruthlessness. Probably both. As the coastline fades, the man beside you grins, holding up a gleaming cup he's stolen. He drinks salt water from it and laughs until he chokes. You clutch your blistered palms and whisper to yourself, "One raid is more than enough." For the Vikings, this was a way of life. For you, it's the kind of day that haunts dreams. And the worst part is, dawn will still come, and there will still be chores, smoke, and goats waiting for you when you return. So much for glory. The raid lingers in your body like a sickness. Your shoulders ache, your palms throb, and your stomach still churns with the memory of fire and screams. You crave rest, quiet, maybe even some reassurance that life isn't just a string of smoke-filled longhouses and bloodied axes. But in Viking lands, comfort often comes wrapped in ritual, in the invisible presence of gods who are said to watch every deed, whisper in every storm, and demand their price for protection. Religion isn't something you stumble upon once a week in a building. Here, it seeps into every crack of daily life. The first thing you notice is the charms. Bits of carved bone hang from belts. Smooth stones etched with symbols dangle from necks. Children scratch strange marks into the dirt, chanting little rhymes as though the runes themselves will bend fate. You pick up a shard of wood someone has discarded. A rune is carved into it. A simple line crossed by another, angled just so. You frown, trying to place it. A gray-haired woman leans over and tells you, almost casually, "That one wards off fever. Keep it close." She tucks it into your belt before you can protest. And just like that, you're initiated. Runes aren't just letters here. They are symbols of power, whispers from Odin himself, each stroke charged with meaning. Carve the right rune onto your axe, and you may strike harder. Inscribe another onto your door, and your goats might stay healthy. It's a world where language isn't passive, it acts. You feel both reassured and unnerved because part of you knows it's superstition, yet another part can't ignore the weight of the carved wood pressing against your side. Historians still argue whether most common people could actually read or use runes fluently, or if they relied on specialists, seers, poets, priests to interpret them. What's clear is that everyone believed they worked, whether or not they fully understood them, and belief here is power. The gods themselves are everywhere, invoked in every task. You hear Thor's name muttered when a hammer slips, Odin's whispered before a man heads to the thing. Freyr is invoked before planting seed, Freya before childbirth. Each god is less a distant figure and more a nosy neighbor, one you must keep on good terms with, lest your luck sour. Quirky tidbit, some Viking farmers even dedicated part of their meals to the gods by sprinkling bits of food onto the fire. Burnt bread crust, drops of ale, the fatty piece of meat. You watch as a man tosses a fish head into the flames, muttering that it's for Njord, the sea god. Practical? Maybe not. But after rowing a long ship through waves that nearly tossed you overboard, you figure a little divine bribery can't hurt. And then there are the sacrifices. Not all are grand. Sometimes it's a loaf, sometimes a carved toy, sometimes a lock of hair. But the serious rituals, those stop you cold. You're led into a clearing one evening, torches flickering against tall poles carved with faces. People gather, voices low, breath misting in the chill. A goat is brought forward, bleeding nervously. You want to step back, but the crowd presses close. A priest, if that's the right word, raises a knife carved with spirals, chants, and then with one swift motion, the animal falls silent. The blood is caught in a bowl, sprinkled across the crowd with evergreen twigs. A drop hits your cheek, hot against your cold skin. The people around you lift their faces to it, some smiling faintly as though kissed by blessing. You freeze, unsure whether to wipe it away or pretend to welcome it. The air feels thick, heavier than the longhouse smoke, as though the gods themselves are watching. It's unsettling, yet strangely unifying. You can feel the release of tension in the crowd, the sense of connection. The goat's death is not cruelty. Not to them, it's a bargain. Life for protection, blood for favor. And you realize that this religion is less about faith and more about transaction. The gods don't promise love, they promise strength if you pay their price. Later, by the fire, a young man tells you of tales where men and even kings were sacrificed, hung from trees or buried beneath stones to secure victory in battle or bounty in harvest. He grins as your eyes widen. He says, "Don't worry, they only do that when times are really bad." You laugh nervously, though you notice he didn't actually say it never happens. Scholars still debate just how widespread human sacrifice was in Viking societies. Some say it was rare, exaggerated by later Christian writers eager to paint the Norse as savages. Others believe it happened more often than we'd like to imagine, especially in desperate times. Standing there with dried goat blood still sticky on your sleeve, you realize the truth probably sits somewhere in the smoky middle. Night falls, and you lie awake in the longhouse, the rune shard still tucked into your belt. The goat's bleat echoes in your ears. The crowd's murmurs, the torchlight, the feeling of something unseen brushing against the back of your neck, it all lingers. You whisper to yourself that it was just ritual, just tradition, nothing more. But in your gut, you're not so sure. The gods here don't feel abstract. They feel immediate, volatile, and a little terrifying. And whether you believe in them or not, their worshippers certainly do, which means you too must play along or risk becoming the next offering when luck runs thin. You curl tighter into your cloak, listening to someone snore, and wonder if Odin is out there somewhere, one eye glinting in the dark, amused at your discomfort. If so, you really hope the rune in your belt works. The first frosts arrive early, creeping silently into the cracks of the longhouse, stiffening your toes before you've even risen from your straw bed. The hearth is never truly warm anymore. No matter how much wood is fed into the flames, the cold eats at the walls, seeps into your bones, and makes every breath sting. Winter in a Norse village isn't just uncomfortable, it's survival on a knife's edge. By now you've learned the rhythm of the seasons. Summer was sweat and labor. Autumn was frantic gathering. And winter? Winter is reckoning. Whatever you stored, grain, dried fish, salted meat, smoked cheese, has to last. Every bite is counted. Every crumb stretched. Meals shrink. Instead of thick stews, you get thin broths, the flavor carried more by memory than by what's actually in the pot. The bread is rough, sometimes so hard you need to dip it in ale just to soften it enough for chewing. Dried fish becomes your constant companion, its leathery texture tugging at your teeth until your jaw aches. And hunger. Hunger is always there. The villagers watch the storehouses like hawks, counting barrels and sacks, calculating silently. Children whine for more, but they get the same handful as everyone else. Sharing is fairness. To take too much is to condemn another. Historians note that famine wasn't unusual in Viking lands. Poor harvests, harsh storms, or just too many mouths could tip the balance. Some winters hunger was so sharp that families abandoned infants, the weak, or even the elderly. Some sagas whisper of cannibalism in the worst times, though whether those tales are truth or grim exaggeration, no one knows for certain. The cold adds insult to hunger. Your fingers crack open from frost, your nails go purple. Even wrapped in wool and hides, the chill gnaws at you when you work outside. Firewood is hoarded as fiercely as food, and not every day's chores can wait for spring. You chop wood with numb hands, haul icy water until your skin burns, tend to the goats with breath steaming in the dark. Sometimes you press your bare palms against their flanks, desperate for a moment's warmth before trudging back through the snow. At night, the longhouse is a chorus of coughs. The smoke hangs heavy in the rafters, meant to trap warmth, but it burns your lungs and reddens your eyes. People huddle close, cloaks pulled tight, bodies pressed together. Privacy vanishes again, but no one cares. Survival smothers modesty. Then come the stories. With daylight short and work limited by the cold, evenings stretch endlessly. To fill the silence, tales spill forth. You hear sagas of gods battling giants, of great voyages to lands where grapes grow wild and winters never bite, of heroes who win fame by sheer will. Sometimes, though, the stories take darker turns. Ghosts in the snow, restless dead wandering in hunger, curses that steal what little warmth is left. The children cling to their mothers when those are told, but you listen too, shivering not just from the cold. Strangely, the stories help. Hunger eases when you're listening. Frost retreats a little when laughter or gasps ripple through the smoky hall. The imagination, it seems, is another kind of hearth. Yet even with stories and fire, winter is dangerous. You see a man's fingers blacken. Frostbite has taken them. A child grows thin, her cheeks hollowing day by day. Sometimes you hear the sound of weeping at night, muffled beneath cloaks. Grief is never far in winters like these. And so you come to understand the sharp truth of Viking life. Survival isn't guaranteed. Glory in battle, wealth from raiding, honor at the thing, all of it means nothing if winter takes you first. One morning, you wake to silence. The snoring, coughing, muttering longhouse is still. For a moment you panic, then you realize it's the snow. It has fallen heavy in the night, thick and deep, smothering the world in white. Outside, the sky glows faintly, and the village looks as though it's been swallowed by another realm. You step into it, breath cutting like glass in your lungs. For all its danger, winter is beautiful. Every roof is bowed with snow. Every tree sparkles. The fjord is frozen into a gleaming mirror. For a fleeting moment, the hardship feels worth it, because you are alive, and the world, though merciless, is magnificent. You tug your cloak tighter, your stomach hollow, your fingers aching. Winter is far from over, but for now, you trudge back toward the longhouse, carrying the same hope every villager does, that spring will come before the food runs out. It begins with a cough, not yours at first, someone across the longhouse, hacking into the smoky air. But sound carries in the dark, and soon you notice another cough, then another. In a space where dozens of bodies sleep head to head, there's no escaping it. Illness travels here like gossip, fast, invisible, and merciless. You press your cloak tighter around you, trying to hide in the wool, but it doesn't matter. Before long, your own chest burns, your throat rasps, and your breath feels heavy. Welcome to medicine Viking style, where every sniffle could tip into fever, and every fever could tip into death. If you were back in modern times, you'd reach for cough syrup, antibiotics, maybe even a simple orange. Here, the healer has other tools. She crouches near the fire, grinding dried herbs with a stone, her fingers stained from years of mixing concoctions. She mutters charms under her breath as she works, half practical medicine, half whispered prayer. A bundle of dried angelica root is tucked into her pouch, a plant Norse folk considered powerful against disease. Juniper berries are burned to fumigate the air, the sharp smoke chasing away evil spirits as much as bad smells. Sometimes, poultices of honey are applied to wounds. Honey, at least, does fight infection with its natural antibacterial qualities, though the Vikings wouldn't have known the science. But for all these remedies, one fact remains. Illness is often stronger than the cure. A small cut from an axe, a blister that bursts while rowing, even a scratch from a goat's horn, all of these can fester. Without clean water or antiseptic, infection is a monster lurking at the edge of every task. A red streak crawling up your arm, a fever that won't break, a wound that smells foul. These are as deadly as any sword stroke. You've seen men who survived raids only to perish weeks later from something as small as an untreated gash. In the sagas, heroes fall gloriously with swords in their hands. In truth, many more likely fell on a straw mattress, sweating and delirious because of a splinter gone bad. The healer, called as Zaidkona by some, a wise woman by others, tries her best. She recites runes over the sick, sprinkles ashes, lays warm stones on bellies twisted by pain. She knows plants that ease cramps, roots that dull pain, and even mushrooms that make patients slip into a strange half-dreaming state. Some of these work, some are dangerous, and some may be nothing more than hopeful gestures. Historians still argue whether Viking medicine leaned more toward genuine herbal knowledge or ritual magic. Was the chant part of the cure, or just theater to comfort the frightened? Perhaps both. After all, in this world so precarious, belief itself was a medicine of sorts. You catch sight of another side of healing too: bone setting. A boy falls on the ice, his arm bending wrong, and the healer and her helpers pull it straight, splinting it with carved wood and woolen bands. He screams, but in time, the bone will knit. Surgery, though, is another matter. The Vikings did attempt it, trepanning skulls to relieve pressure, for instance. But without anesthetic, without antiseptic, the risks were staggering. Imagine lying on a plank of wood, someone sawing into your flesh with nothing but a knife and a prayer. You'd rather not, thank you. Of course, some people bypass the healer altogether. They trust instead in the gods. Offerings are made to Eir, a goddess associated with healing, or to Thor for strength to fight sickness. Amulets are carved and hung around necks. A dead mouse might even be placed on an infected wound. Yes, really. Folk magic had no shortage of odd suggestions, some laughable, others horrifying. And yet, when you're shivering with fever, cheeks burning, lips cracked, even the strangest cures don't seem so foolish. If someone told you burying a chicken leg under the hearth would make the cough stop, you'd try it without hesitation. In the Longhouse, illness changes the rhythm of life. Work slows down as bodies weaken. A woman too sick to weave means less cloth. A man too weak to chop wood means less fuel. Hunger and cold sharpen the edge of disease until one problem feeds the next. Villages sometimes lost a third of their people in bad years, disease sweeping through like a silent raid. You notice something else though, the care. For all the hardship, people tend to one another. A neighbor brings broth when you can't stand. Someone else places a hand on your forehead, checking the fever, muttering reassurance. Life here is brutal, yes, but it's also bound together. Without kindness, even these fragile remedies wouldn't matter. There's one final thought that creeps into your mind as you lie awake, the cough rattling in your chest. You remember all those stories of great battles and voyages, but here you are, struggling with something as small as a cough. It's humbling and a little cruel. Perhaps glory is only for the sagas, and reality is survival, one shallow breath at a time. You may have thought Viking life was all about raids, axes, and stormy seas. But here, among the goats and the smoke and the endless cold, you realize something else keeps the village alive: relationships. Love and kinship aren't just personal feelings here, they're survival strategies. Every bond you form, whether by marriage, oath, or friendship, is another thread holding you in place in a web that might otherwise let you slip through and vanish. The first time you hear talk of marriage, it isn't whispered behind a barn or accompanied by stolen glances across the Longhouse fire. It's spoken plainly, like a business deal, because that's what it is. Who you wed isn't just about who you fancy, it's about cattle, land, alliances, and the weaving together of families so neither side stands alone in hard times. A father might sit with another man over a jug of ale and discuss the merits of joining their households. One has a son, strong and broad-shouldered. The other has a daughter, clever with cloth, skilled at managing stores, and, most importantly, of childbearing age. You don't get much of a vote. If you're lucky, you might meet the person beforehand. If you're luckier still, you might actually like them. But more often, you find yourself promised before you've exchanged more than a polite nod. Historians still argue whether Vikings truly bought their wives, or whether the bride price and dowry were more like financial gestures between families. The sagas sometimes present fierce women who speak their minds and set conditions, so perhaps it varied by household. But either way, marriage is less about fluttering hearts and more about survival math. That doesn't mean affection never blooms. Imagine sharing endless winter nights together, working shoulder to patch roofs, stir pots, or mend nets. Affection grows slowly, through familiarity, patience, and the small kindnesses that pierce the day. You hand your partner the last piece of dried fish, or they pull an extra cloak over your shoulders when you've fallen asleep by the fire. Romance here is quiet, not sung by harps, but carved into the rhythm of endurance. Friendship matters just as much. You've likely heard of the term Fostbrodler lag, the foster brother bond. In sagas, men swear oaths of loyalty so deep they'd avenge each other's deaths no matter the cost. These bonds weren't mere words. They were contracts of protection in a world where feuds could erupt over the smallest insult. Picture yourself at the Thing, accused of wrongdoing. If you stand alone, you're vulnerable. But if you stand with your sworn brother beside you, others think twice. These alliances can mean the difference between exile and survival, or between your farm being raided and it being spared. Of course, friendships can sour. A spilled drink, an unkept promise, or jealousy over cattle can ignite feuds that echo for generations. Some sagas are little more than chains of vengeance sparked by fractured bonds. Here, loyalty is a treasure, and betrayal a curse. Kinship is the ultimate glue. Families expand in layers, cousins, uncles, distant relations who suddenly appear in times of crisis. Your kin define who supports you and who you support in turn. Blood isn't just thicker than water, it's your safety net when harvests fail or enemies circle. The flip side is that feuds also travel through blood. If your cousin kills a man, congratulations, you're now part of that quarrel whether you like it or not. If your uncle owes silver, your name is tarnished by his debt. Bonds carry weight, both sweet and crushing. Among all this practicality, though, you still see glimpses of tenderness. You catch a boy shyly carving runes into a piece of driftwood for a girl, fumbling to make the symbols neat. You see a mother stroking her child's hair by firelight, whispering sagas to lull them to sleep. You hear laughter erupt at the Longhouse table when friends share a joke too coarse to repeat. And then there are weddings themselves. For all the negotiation and planning, when the day arrives, the village celebrates. Ale flows, meat roasts on spits, songs fill the smoky air. The bride's hair is combed with care, the groom is given weapons as symbols of responsibility, and torches burn bright against the northern night. Whatever the reasons behind the match, for one day at least, there is joy. Still, don't mistake joy for ease. Marriage isn't always kind. Some partners clash, some families regret the alliance, and sometimes the arrangement is simply endured. Divorce, surprisingly, is possible here. Both men and women could end marriages, though reasons had to be declared publicly, like neglect, violence, or failure to provide. Even in a society that treats unions as contracts, personal dignity has its place. So you lie awake in the Longhouse, listening to the snoring all around you, and you think about how fragile and powerful bonds are here. They tether you, sometimes against your will, sometimes with comfort. They weave you into the fabric of the village, making sure you don't unravel. Without them, you'd be a loose thread in the cold wind. With them, you at least have a chance. The Longhouse is quiet only in patches, most often at dawn, when bodies are too tired to stir, or at midday, when chores drag everyone outside. But when the sun dips behind the fjord and shadows lengthen, the building breathes with a different kind of energy. The day's labor has ended, the goats are penned, the children, well, most of them, are drowsing under cloaks, and now comes the part of Viking life that almost feels like luxury, the telling of stories. You huddle closer to the fire because no matter how many winters you've endured by now, the cold is still a creature with teeth. Sparks climb lazily into the smoke-blackened rafters, and beside you someone passes a drinking horn, the ale inside a little sour but still warming as it slides down your throat. And then, from the corner of the room, a voice begins. It's not a preacher's voice, nor a commander's. It's something livelier, carrying rhythm as much as words. The Skald has arrived. Skalds are more than mere entertainers. They are historians, politicians, comedians, and magicians of memory all at once. In a world without books, they are the living library, carrying sagas and genealogies in their minds the way a farmer carries tools on his belt. A good skald can win favor with a lord, secure a seat by the fire, or even shift the course of an argument at the thing. Words here are weapons as sharp as any sword. The Skald tonight begins with a tale of Thor fishing for Jormungandr, the great serpent. You've heard this story before. Everyone has, but it never loses its power. You picture Thor straining against the line, his hammer at the ready, sweat beading on his brow as the sea buckles around him. The children gasp at the right moments, the adults chuckle at the Skald's exaggerated gestures, and someone in the back mutters that Thor should have brought him along to help. Laughter ripples through the room. Humor, you realize, is a balm. Even when the winter is cruel, even when bellies growl, laughter keeps the edges of despair from cutting too deep. But the Skald doesn't only weave gods into the smoke. Soon he pivots, voice dropping, eyes narrowing. Now he tells of Egil Skallagrimsson, warrior, poet, and notorious hothead whose temper could scorch a hall. Egil is said to have written biting verses so sharp they cursed his enemies, but also tender ones for his family. The Skald delivers both kinds, his tone shifting from thunder to whisper. You notice how the listeners lean forward at the mention of Egil's temper, how they nod in sympathy when the tale turns to grief. In this moment, you see how sagas are not just entertainment, they are mirrors. Through them, villagers measure their own lives, comparing grief, pride, and mistakes to those of larger-than-life figures. It's a way to make sense of hardship, to anchor the present in stories that suggest survival, honor, and maybe a little hope. And then comes the rowdy part. Someone bangs a mug against the table, demanding a verse about Harold Fairhire, the king who supposedly vowed never to cut his hair until he conquered all of Norway. The Skald obliges with a cheeky rhyme, mocking Harold's tangled locks and comparing him to a goat left out in the rain. The hall bursts into laughter, ale sloshes, and for a few minutes, even kings become targets of jokes. This is the safer kind of rebellion, poking fun within the safety of song. Mockery disguised in rhythm can be shrugged off as humor, but everyone knows it's a way to voice feelings that might otherwise be dangerous. Historians still argue whether skaldic poetry was truly for the people or mostly performed in elite courts, but in your smoky hall, it feels like a shared hearth, fame and folly handed down like bread. Not all stories are about the famous, though. Sometimes a local tale slips in, half memory, half embellishment. Perhaps that time your neighbor's cow wandered off and turned up in a rival farm's field, or about the unlucky fisherman who capsized and swore a mermaid had dragged him down. These tales are delivered with exaggerated flair, each retelling twisting a little more until the cow becomes a spirit in disguise and the fisherman's mermaid grows scales made of silver. Truth isn't the point, community is. And amid all the laughter, there's ale, always ale. Brewed thick from barley, sometimes spiced with herbs, sometimes so sour it puckers your lips. It flows freely during these evenings. Drinking horns pass from hand to hand, and though most drink in moderation, because ale is also food after all, some let themselves drift into tipsy boldness. Jokes get louder, songs get sloppier, the longhouse grows warmer with voices rising. There's also song, loud chants with pounding rhythms, verses repeating until they become more roar than tune. Someone claps the beat against the table, others stomp the floor. The children laugh and try to join, their small voices swallowed in the noise. For a while the longhouse shakes with sound, the kind that rattles your teeth and makes you grin despite yourself. But then, as quickly as it rose, the noise subsides. The Skald begins again, this time with a tale of loss. A ship swallowed by the sea, a mother mourning a son who never returned. The hall grows quiet, firelight painting sorrow across faces. It's a reminder, perhaps intentional, that life is fragile here, that every joy is matched by its shadow. And yet, despite the grief, there's comfort. These stories bind everyone together, reminding them that suffering is shared, not borne alone. You find yourself leaning on the shoulder beside you, not even caring whose it is, because in that moment, the hall breathes as one. The night drags long, but you hardly notice. Words, laughter, and songs stretch time, turning hunger into something bearable, the cold into something distant. The Longhouse is smoky, noisy, and crowded, yes, but it is also alive. And when the last story fades, the fire dwindles to embers, and the Skald wraps himself in a cloak to sleep, you curl down on your straw bed with words still ringing in your ears. Gods, kings, fools, and heroes, they dance through your dreams, carrying you into another night of survival. The first time you set foot on a ship bound for trade rather than raid, you expect it to feel gentler, safer somehow. But the sea laughs at your expectations. Whether the cargo is weapons and warriors or wool and walrus ivory, the water doesn't care. It rises and falls with the same merciless rhythm, pitching the long ship until your stomach churns and your hands cling white-knuckled to the gunwale. The Vikings may be known for their raids, but the truth is, trade was just as vital, sometimes more. Raiding could bring glory and riches, yes, but it also risked loss and death. Trading, while not without danger, carried the promise of steady silver and goods that kept households alive. So here you are, a reluctant merchant's apprentice, sailing toward horizons you've never seen. The cargo beneath your feet is far from glamorous. Bundles of woolen cloth, painstakingly woven by women back in the village, lie stacked beside barrels of fish and hides stiff with salt. Amber, gathered from the Baltic shores, glows faintly even in the dim light. In return, you hope to bring back treasures, Frankish wine, glass beads, spices, fine swords, maybe even silk from lands so distant their names sound like spells. The ship creaks as the wind fills the sail, a square canvas that snaps and groans like it's alive. The oars dip rhythmically when the breeze dies, your arms burning with the effort. You wonder how many miles of sea separate you from your narrow bed in the smoky longhouse, how many weeks until you taste familiar ale again. And then, storm. The sky darkens faster than your heart can catch up. Clouds swallow the light, waves rise like living beasts, and suddenly the ship is no longer a vessel, but a toy tossed by giants. Water slams against the planks, sprays over the bow, and soaks your cloak until you're shivering with cold. The steersmen shout, voice ripped away by the wind, and the oarsmen strain to keep rhythm as thunder cracks overhead. You clutch at the side, knuckles numb, praying to any god who'll listen. Odin, Thor, Njord, take your pick, maybe even all of them at once, because you're not picky when drowning is on the table. Someone starts muttering a charm under his breath. Another man kisses an amulet hanging at his neck, and still the sea rages. When the storm finally passes, the relief is almost worse than the fear. You sit in stunned silence, teeth chattering, looking out at the endless gray. The ocean hasn't killed you yet, but it has reminded you who's in charge. Spoiler, it isn't you. Days later, the ship noses into a foreign harbor. The air smells different here. Spices, smoke, sweat. Shouts and languages you barely understand rattle the docks, and the crowd is a swirl of faces, some welcoming, some wary. Here, Vikings are not just raiders, but customers, and customers with good goods are rarely turned away. You see markets piled with wonders, glass so clear you can see your reflection, silver coins stamped with strange kings' heads, fabrics so fine they slip through your fingers like water. Traders from the east carry furs, wax, and honey. From the south come wines, oils, and ornaments that glimmer in the sun. For the first time in months, your belly growls at the scent of roasted meat you didn't salt or smoke yourself. Bargaining begins. The ship's leader steps forward, laying out your offerings. He haggles fiercely, his words quick and sharp, hands gesturing, face stern. Trade is a battle of its own, just without blood. Silver weighs against wool, beads against amber, steel against spices. You learn that a sharp tongue and steady nerve can win more than a sharpened sword, though having a dozen armed men behind you never hurts. Historians still argue how much of Viking wealth came from raiding versus trading. Some point to the silver hoards buried across Scandinavia as proof of commerce. Others claim raiding was always the main driver. In truth, the line is thin. Many voyages blended the two. Trade when welcomed, raid when resisted. A Viking, after all, was nothing if not adaptable. In foreign taverns, you hear tales of lands farther still. Men boast of sailing down rivers into the Slavic heartlands, of reaching Constantinople, that glittering city of domes and treasures, where the Varangian Guard, fierce Norse warriors, serve as elite bodyguards for emperors. Others whisper of journeys beyond, into the lands of the caliphs, where gold flows like rivers and spices can make a man rich enough to buy whole farms back home. Do you believe every tale? Probably not. But as the firelight flickers on foreign walls and the air hums with voices you don't understand, you realize one thing: the Viking world is bigger than you imagined. It stretches from the cold fjords to the warm seas, from the edge of Britain to the far-off deserts. And you, seasick and shivering, are one tiny thread in that vast weave. The journey home is no easier. Storms threaten again, pirates lurk, and the sea tests your will with every mile. But in the hold are treasures: silk, silver, spices, glass. When you finally stagger onto familiar shores, your cloak stiffed with salt, the village greets you not as a survivor, but as a provider. These goods will buy favors, seal alliances, and perhaps soften the next long winter. Trade, you realize, is conquest of a different kind. Not of land or lives, but of distance, danger, and uncertainty. It shapes your world as much as the axe or the plow. And yet, lying back in the smoky longhouse that night, with strange beads now strung around your neck and foreign scents still clinging to your cloak, you can't help but think the horizon is always waiting, and it's always hungry. The day always ends the same way, with the fire. Not one fire, but many, scattered hearths glowing like small, stubborn stars within the smoke-dark belly of the longhouse. Their flames no longer roar, they sink into red embers, whispering heat into the thick night air. You sit close, hunched, shoulders heavy with the weight of wood chopped, nets pulled, hides stretched, laws shouted, and storms survived. Around you, the house breathes like a single living creature. Children whimper in their sleep, turning over on straw pallets. Someone coughs in the shadows, the sound ragged and weary. A man snores so loud it rattles the rafters, but no one bothers to hush him. It is the sound of survival, of lungs still drawing breath. Dogs curl at the edges of the hall, eyes half open, tails twitching in dreams. The air smells of smoke, sweat, and damp wool, with a faint undercurrent of salted fish. You stretch out on your bedding, a thin layer of straw beneath a rough wool blanket, itchy against your skin. If you're lucky, the blanket is yours alone. More often you share it with kin, bodies pressed together for warmth when winter bites hardest. Privacy is a luxury no one here expects, least of all you. The flicker of a last flame catches your eye. For a moment, shadows on the timber walls seem to move, as if the carved dragon heads, runes, and charms etched into the wood have come alive. You think of the Skalds' tales told earlier in the evening, of gods and giants, of fates woven long before your birth. Perhaps they watch even now, in this smoky hush, unseen but near. Sleep does not come as rest, so much as surrender. Your body aches, your hands raw from rope, stone, or loom. Your ears still ring with shouts from the thing, with the crash of waves, with the creak of axes into wood. The rhythm of Viking life is a hammer that beats without pause, and tonight you are the anvil. A soft murmur rises, a prayer, a blessing, or maybe just a half-dreamed word from someone already drifting into sleep. You wonder if the gods hear such fragments, carried by smoke up through the rafters into the endless sky. If not the gods, then perhaps the ancestors. You remember the mound graves outside the village, stones marking those who once lay where you now lie. Their bones are dust, their stories half-remembered, yet their presence lingers in the silence between snores. The embers shrink further, glowing faint as stars lost in morning light. Someone stirs the fire, coaxing out one last lick of flame, but it soon sags back into red. The longhouse darkens. Finally, exhaustion takes you whole. Your muscles loosen, your mind dulls, and you drift under the weight of smoke and fatigue. Tomorrow will bring the same: wood to split, fields to sow, boats to mend, feuds to navigate, storms to fear. But for now, the rhythm pauses. The brutal world waits at the door, kept at bay by these fading embers. You close your eyes, and in the hush of a Viking night, the last thing you feel is warmth, fleeting, fragile, and enough. The fire sinks into silence now, a low warmth fading into the hush of night. The longhouse breathes slowly, as if it too is drifting toward rest, its walls sheltering every cough, every murmur, every shifting body. You feel the weight of the day sliding from your shoulders, not with suddenness, but with a gentle release, as though the night itself is lifting each ache from your bones. The smoke is thinned now, and in the dim glow of embers you see almost nothing at all, only soft shapes, blurred by tired eyes. Outside, the cold presses close, yet here within these walls, the air is steady, neither too sharp nor too heavy, just enough to remind you that you are safe, if only for this moment. The sounds become softer now, a dog's sigh, the faint rustle of straw, the distant crack of wood cooling in the hearth. They drift together into a quiet rhythm, something between heartbeat and lullaby. It is not silence, but something kinder, something slower, a world dimmed down until all that remains is rest. You close your eyes and imagine the sea beyond the village, waves rolling endlessly, their motion steady, ancient, and patient. You imagine the fields in winter, still and waiting, holding their strength beneath frost and snow. You imagine the gods above, watching from the shadows of the night sky, distant but calm, as though even they are weary and ready to sleep. So let go, as the Vikings once did when firelight dimmed and the long day ended. Let go of the noise, the weight, the restless turning of thought. The night will hold you. The world will wait. And now, slowly, quietly, gently, sleep.